Hey guys, so in today's video I'm doing another one of my current obsessions slash recommendations video and shows, movies, books, creators, which I've never done before, and I will try to put timestamps in the description so you can watch the part you're most interested in. And yeah, that's everything I wanted to say. Sorry for the background noise. I live in a very noisy area, and yeah, without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first show I wanted to talk about is called Young Royals, and the main character of this show, Wilhelm, I don't know, is a younger son of the Swedish royal family, and he basically gets into a fight with someone during the party, and since it's kind of bad for the family's reputation as a sort of punishment, parents send him to this elite private boarding school that his older brother, who's supposed to take the throne, went to, and he meets a guy there who is from a working class. His name is Simon, and he meets this guy Simon, and they kind of fall in love with each other, and I really like how, although this story is set in a world of very rich and affluential people, it doesn't really focus on that, and it focuses on more relatable struggles of teenagers. And I also like the very realistic depiction of how teenagers behave towards one another and what their decisions are driven by. And also there was one neurodivergent character, which I also really appreciate. One thing that I kind of find weird about this show, and if you watch it you will kind of understand why I find this weird. Basically, it is never addressed how the working class characters are able to afford going to that school, which is just, it's honestly the only problem I have with this show. Besides that, I really like it. Another show I have is Netflix original called Never Have I Ever. So it's basically about this Indian girl named Devi, and she's kind of a nerd, and she falls in love with a popular boy, and honestly the plot is kind of basic, but I like how they kind of twisted it. They also added a narrator to that show, and the narrator is an Olympic swimmer. I forgot his name, and I also forgot why was he chosen by a narrator, but they explained it in the first episode. Anyway, also Devi recently lost her father, so it's a lot about dealing with grief and loss. And what I really like is how this show tackles sensitive topics, but still keeps the overall tone of the show pretty lighthearted, and at the same time it doesn't I don't know, devalue the sensitive topics. It is still shown as a very serious issue, but I don't know, it's just not depressing. The main character, Devi, she is sort of unlikable, which is supposed to make her more relatable, and every time she is supposed to make a decision, she always makes the wrong choice. So it's this kind of show that you watch when you feel everything in your life fails and you feel you're not the only one. So yeah, would highly recommend that if you want something that is, I guess, more lighthearted, and overall it was a really fun show. So the first movie I have is called Tournament. Do I even pronounce that right? I don't know. So it's a love story that takes place in the 30s and then during World War II, and it's told from the perspective of younger sister of the main character, Cecilia. So the son of her housekeeper named Robbie writes a love letter to her, and he also writes another letter, a more straightforward love letter, if you know what I mean. By accident, he gives the second one to this little sister, and she reads this letter and she gets a very wrong assumption of this guy, and then also something happens, and I can't really say much more because it gets kind of twisted, and in the second half of the movie you kind of lose the sense of reality, and it's kind of hard to figure out what has actually happened and what is part of one of the characters' imagination, and it is extremely sad. Another movie I have on this list is called Before Sunrise, and it's the first part of the Before trilogy. And it's about an American guy, Jesse, and this French woman, Celine, and they meet on a train, and they decide to leave in Vienna and go on like this spontaneous one-day adventure together, and they basically have time until the next day's sunrise, because then the girl has train to Paris where she lives, and they just walk around Vienna and have these really meaningful conversations, and it's a really beautiful movie. It's honestly, it's not like there is something crazy happening in there, it's literally they just walk and talk, but you know, the Vienna scenery just makes it really beautiful, and since it lacks like very crazy moments of like running through the airport to make a love confession, this movie feels actually like quite realistic, and I feel like the second and the third part maybe feel even more realistic. Yeah, highly recommend it. So the next movie I wanted to talk about is called Mid-90s, and it's about a 14-year-old boy who starts hanging out with these older guys that he really looks up to, and they basically just like skate together, and the whole movie is just such a vibe, you know, there's a lot of shots of them skating and stuff like that, and it's basically like a coming of age story, and it talks about things like, you know, abusive household and peer pressure, and I wouldn't really say that this movie is like filled with crazy action, but it's definitely filled with beautiful shots of skating. It's filmed in this 3 to 4 dimension. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I will put this on this movie right now. So it basically kind of like imitates the 90s movie screen. And I don't know, it's just a really visually pleasing experience. So the first book I want to recommend is Genuine Fraud by E. Lockhart. It's about like a toxic friendship between two girls. They are both orphans, and the story is kind of twisted, and it's also told from like the reverse, so it starts in the end chronologically, and basically something happened between these two girls, and you are slowly unpacking what has happened while you're reading. And it is a really good book if you're in a reading slump, because it's very fast-paced. It's a really interesting story that makes you want to read the whole thing in one sitting, and it has short chapters, which I think it's really good for adding dynamic to the book. So if you are in the reading slump and you want to just read more, I would highly recommend starting from this book. Another book that I've actually talked a little bit about before is called Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and it takes place in a private boarding school that students are not allowed to leave while they go there, and their information about the outside world are very limited, and Kathy and her friends Ruth and Toby are trying to figure out who they are and what they're supposed to do, and like what's their quote-unquote fate and how can they escape it. And I just must say that this book is really sad and really heartbreaking, so be prepared for that. It's beautifully written, and I could literally spoiler this book with one word, so I'm not gonna say it because it's more fun when you read it and you figure it out on your own. And also, one thing that's really fun is that it starts when characters are like 6, I believe, and then they grow up, and it ends when they're, I think, in their early 30s. So it's just, you know, not only like the situation changes, but also their perception of reality. So it's really great, awesome book. So this book, it's called Exciting Times by I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry. Nazi Dolan, and it's about a 22-year-old Ava who moves to Hong Kong, and she teaches rich Asians kids English there, and this book mostly focuses on her relationship with people she meets in Hong Kong, and it also has a very interesting discussion about race, class, sexuality, and it's really interesting, and it's also really funny, honestly. I love the way it's written. It kind of reminds me of Sally Rooney. It was actually even compared to that. I would say this is less depressing than Normal People, so if you like Normal People but you're looking for something that's a little bit less effed up, I think you would like that. So my favorite creators, I could actually do like a separated video on that, but for now I only chose like 3 people. So let's start with Veronica, and she's actually from my hometown, and she studies in London at UCL, and she basically, most of her videos are like vlogs of her life there in London, and it's really fun to watch someone who is from your hometown and just from similar circumstances doing something that you would like to do, because it's very motivating and it makes you feel that like you can do it too. So that's just how it makes me feel watching her, and her videos always have like this main character-y vibe, and I like her editing. Her editing is so beautiful, and I like how she makes her videos like really aesthetically pleasing, but she also keeps them realistic, and she, you know, openly talks about her feelings and things she is worried about, and like her struggles with like figuring out what she wants to do in the future and stuff like that. And yeah, I would highly recommend checking out her channel, especially if you like Moya Mawini and Dana Florence. So like she has quite similar vibe. Another YouTuber I wanted to recommend is Jack Edwards, and he talks about books, but he does it in like a really fun and experimental way. So he, for example, reads celebrities' favorite books and reviews them, or Tyler ranking bad celebrity poetry, or I followed famous authors' daily routines for a week as an act of self-sabotage, or my favorite one, rating every book Lisa Simpson reads in The Simpsons on how inappropriate they are for an 8-year-old. I really like him. He's really funny. I got a lot of book recommendations from him, like for example Exciting Times. I think I first heard about this book from him, and then I've also heard about this book from Anne Carly, who is also one of my favorite booktubers. And she also has like really fun videos, like for example she has this one called Rating Girl Bosses on how much I would like to hang out with them, something like that, so it's really fun. So another YouTuber I've been really enjoying recently, I haven't been watching her for a very long time, but I really like her videos. So she's called Mina Lee, I think. And she does like fashion and film commentary, and I am very interested in both of these topics, and she really knows a lot about the things she's talking about. And she, for example, does analysis of costumes in famous shows and movies. Like I think I discovered her from the video Emily in Paris is a fashion disaster, and then I watched Fashion in the Queen's Gambit, and the Fashion in the Queen's Gambit video made me love this show even more, because I learned how like the costumes are like so perfectly fitting everything that's taking place in the show. And she also, her recent video TikTok is kind of bad for fashion, would highly recommend that. And if you're interested in fashion or film or both, I would highly recommend her channel. So yeah, these are all of my recommendations for this video. If you watched, read, listened to anything I've mentioned, comment below. I would love to discuss this with you guys, and comment below some of your recommendations. And yeah, if you enjoyed, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next video. Goodbye. Have a great rest of your day.